you had a great quote from Nietzsche that you used in your conversation with John Vervaeke. What was that about? Don't trust any philosophy born in a room without windows.
It was don't trust a thought born in a room without windows, and don't trust a philosophy that wasn't born walking.
Yeah, it feels like we could say like don't trust a movement practice that's born in isolation in a closed space, right?
Yeah.
Right, like the gymnasia, right? Like I'm super inspired, obviously, through John Vervaeke's work to think about kind of the roots of philosophy and wisdom cultivation in the West, wisdom tradition in the West, and among the Greeks. And it's like the Greek gymnasia were outdoors, right? They were in open spaces, and they were, like Plato's Academy, the Academy, the Academos was a sacred grove of Athena. So like the nature was right there. And then they put a place for everyone to run right next to it, a place for everyone to wrestle right next to it. And yeah, it's like somehow when we put it in a box, right? That's what CrossFit calls their facilities, their boxes. And what does that say symbolically when you think about your general physical practice as something that you go into a box to do, and you do it in a box and you leave it in the box in some sense?
Well, it's even further than that. So the way I've been explaining it to people using what you just said, people gathered in the sacred olive grove and they started to do these physical practices together that born the gymnasia. Well, people are tired and they're sore, so they start chatting. Philosophy, becomes a hot topic. The academy is born. Out of the academy comes a scientific perspective, and then now we are in AI. So it's like if this was the body born in nature, now we've gone so far in the other direction that people are doing their fitness in virtual landscapes.
Yep.
So you're not just in a box. That would be better in my personal view but now it's beyond that. And again, when I was talking with John, I'm like, what are the unintended consequences of this? If we know that shoes, books, beds, and chairs, and cars, and all these things, they have consequences that we're not fully aware of in in relationship to their benefits. So it's like,
Mhm.
what is the long term consequence of a physical practice? Maybe you're like the fittest, most engaged physical person in a VR landscape. You have all the PRs and points, but it's like, what? Yeah, what kind of person, what kind of thoughts are born out of that perspective?
Yeah. Just for the audience, I want to ground some of the things you just pointed to. So I'm surprised how many people don't think about shoes, right? I see all these little kids running around with these absurd shoes with massive heels, all these things, and I'm like, their parents don't just recognize that they're setting their kids up for orthopedic things, and like the coordination challenge of moving this giant shoe around. And it's like it's so thoughtless the way that we treat our children's feet, as a culture. And what the science that I've looked at has indicated is, you put an arch support under the arch, and the muscles turn off. And so you're going around all the time with that muscle atrophying that produces the arch in your foot. Shoes constrict the toes. The toes are constantly being pushed inwards towards each other. So we lose full breadth and capacity of the toes. We lose the motor control. Everything starts to get wired together. So, you know, when we learn to read, that's such a fascinating thing. Like obviously reading is such a great psychotechnology for us, but we, you know, we become much more prone to myopia, right? We literally start to scan the world differently. We are more comfortable scanning, if we're in our culture, from left to right than from right to left. And our eyes are habitually doing that, which is, who knows what the effect that's having on the hemispheres and how we use the hemispheres and how we integrate the hemispheres. Like the physical technology itself might be part of this, rise of the left hemisphere to dominate, right? If we're always doing this and ever doing this, like motorically, what's happening? Um, but the other thing that happens when we learn to read, we repurpose parts of the brain that go into facial recognition to recognize script. And so people who come from cultures that uh, that read actually aren't as good at certain things as people that come from cultures that don't read. And we don't think about these costs at all, right? Memory, of course, right? Like memory is a huge art to the Greeks. We don't produce memory. We put that, hey, Google, you know, which
Yeah,
paint
like
applying that?
maps is a big one. Nobody knows how to get around their
Yeah,
town. And I've personally lost my ability to spell words
yeah,
because of autocorrect.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, so just to bring it back to movement is what is the loss? And I wonder if that is why our programs are so simple and so powerful. It re-engages these ways of being in the environments in which they evolved.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. That we started this conversation in some sense. I think I remember very much talking about connection, right? What are people getting out of it? You're connecting them to themselves, to the environment, and to each other, right? So we talk about five fundamental connections, right? Which is basically those three that you talked about: the internal relationship with the self, the environment. We just split that into two. The environment is a landscape we can move through, and the environment is a set of objects that we can manipulate. Then other people, and the last is the transcendent. Um, those are the five relationships that we're trying to kind of guide people back to. And there's a way in which all of it is there for us when we're in our body.
Mm.
When we're in our body, um, like really in our body doing things, then we can start to experience the whole experience of reality.